If you want to find the world's most concentrated, untouchable wealth, you probably shouldn't be looking at Silicon Valley.
No, definitely not. Or even, hedge fund managers in Manhattan.
Right. You actually need to look at the Vatican. Welcome to a brand new deep dive, everyone.
We are tearing down the illusion of global wealth today.
Exactly. We're going to explore how the real money on this planet isn't sitting in, like, giant vaults of gold bullion. It's actually legally woven into the land we walk on, the governments that rule us, and the computer algorithms that quietly manage our retirement funds.
It's a complete paradigm shift, honestly, when you stop looking for these cartoonish vaults of cash and start tracing the actual legal mechanisms that move capital. A completely different, much more complex picture emerges.
And that map of global power is exactly what we are exploring for you today. Our mission on this deep dive is to unpack an incredibly rigorous body of research by Dr. Khaled Waleed.
Yes, his work is exhaustive. He spent years mathematically mapping global monopolies.
Right, tracing the flow of wealth from ancient religious institutions all the way to modern mega asset managers. But he doesn't just point out the problems. He lays out a highly detailed blueprint,
which he calls the 3 Trillion Project.
Yeah, the 3 Trillion Project. And it's designed to eradicate global hunger in slums without, starting a class war or seizing private property.
Which sounds impossible, but his methodology unearths the actual legal architectures, keeping trillions insulated from taxation.
Now, before we jump into the numbers, a really important note for you listening. Dr. Waleed's sources and data touch heavily on major global religious institutions.
Right, specifically Islamic, Christian, and Jewish holdings.
Yeah, as well as sovereign states and royal families. So we need to be crystal clear up front. We are not taking any political, religious, or ideological sides today.
Not at all.
We are simply acting as your guides, reporting impartially on the financial data and the ideas contained within Dr. Waleed's original source material.
We are looking strictly at the math and the legal plumbing of the global economy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Dr. Waleed organizes this wealth monopoly into 3 distinct layers. Let's look at the foundational layer, the legitimacy of land.
Which means religious institutions.
Right, but wait, why start there? I mean, religion isn't exactly moving fast capital through global markets.
Well, what's fascinating here is how Dr. Waleed redefines what wealth actually means at this level. We tend to think of wealth as, liquid cash that you can just move around.
Right, like stocks or something.
Exactly. But for religious institutions, the true power isn't liquid cash. It is the perpetual tax-exempt monopoly over leasing rights.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the religious legitimacy that basically inherently protects those rights from being audited or seized by a state.
And the numbers he pulls to demonstrate this are just staggering. Like, look at the Vatican. According to Dr. Waleed's data, the Vatican has a revalued book value of 2.6 billion euros.
Which is massive on its own.
It is, and they saw their profits jump over 35% in 2024 to about 62.2 million euros. They're actually expected to net $3 billion in 2025.
But that's just the cash flow, right?
Exactly. The real jaw-dropper is the underlying asset. Their real estate portfolio is estimated between $10 and $15 billion, simply because they own 177 million acres globally.
Just stop and think about the mechanics of 177 million acres. That is a scale of land ownership that is larger than many actual countries.
Right.
And because it's legally tied to an ancient religious institution, it sits entirely outside the normal cycles of buying, selling, and taxing. It never hits the open market.
It's just locked in a permanent tax-exempt trust.
Exactly. The institution just collects the rent, generation after generation.
And Dr. Waleed proves this isn't just a Vatican strategy. He applies the exact same financial lens to the global Islamic Waqf, which are essentially religious endowments.
Right.
The World Bank estimates their value globally is somewhere between $100 billion and $1 trillion. In Egypt alone, preliminary estimates put the Waqf wealth at $45 billion, with 2024 statements pointing to over $60.3 billion.
Because the underlying legal mechanism is identical. A Waqf isn't a corporation trying to flip real estate for a quick quarterly profit.
It's an endowment held in perpetuity.
Yes. The legal structure designates the property as belonging to God, which practically means the human administrators are shielded from state taxation and market volatility.
Completely insulated.
Right. The wealth is generated through leasing and long-term control, protected by religious sanctity.
And Dr. Waleed also maps institutional Zionism in this same layer, specifically looking at the Jewish National Fund, or JNF. The data shows they own 13% of Israel's land.
Right, disclosing $2 billion in land assets.
Yeah, with the U.S. branch alone holding over $414 million in net assets.
So across Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, the foundational bedrock of global monopoly is land. It's the ultimate trump card.
Because you can't easily tax it.
You can't tax it, you can't force a sale, and seizing it would spark a holy war. It provides a centuries-long stream of untaxable rent.
Well, I mean, religion locking down land has its limits, right? Land isn't liquid. If you want to move billions across borders instantly, endowments are too slow.
Which is exactly why Dr. Waleed's second layer shifts from religious legitimacy to sovereign power. This is the realm of ruling families.
Okay, layer 2.
Right. And this is where the legal lines between public state treasuries and private family wealth are intentionally blurred.
Yeah, I always see those Bloomberg billionaire lists, like the top family wealth rankings.
Yeah.
For 2025, they have the Al Nahyan family at $335.9 billion.
Right. And the Al Saud family at $213.6 billion?
Yeah, and the Al Thani family at under $99.5 billion. But Dr. Waleed points out a massive loophole in those rankings, doesn't he?
He really does. Those Bloomberg numbers only count what is categorized on paper strictly as private family wealth.
Like yachts and private accounts.
Exactly. They completely ignore the sovereign wealth funds that these exact same families have absolute control over, and those state funds exceed $3.5 trillion.
Hold on. I need to understand how this practically works.
Yeah.
If it's a sovereign wealth fund, it belongs to the nation, right? It's public money.
Technically, yes.
So how does a ruling family use it as a private financial weapon?
Well, the sovereign wallet acts as a legal and diplomatic shield. When they invest globally through a sovereign wealth fund, they act with the tax advantages and diplomatic immunity of a nation state.
Oh, I see. It's like having a massive joint bank account for a whole town, right?
Mm-hmm.
But only one family knows the PIN code,
Yeah.
and they get to spend all the interest.
That is the perfect way to look at it. If an average billionaire tries to buy a massive stake in a foreign energy grid, there are anti-monopoly hearings.
But when a sovereign wealth fund does it, it's a diplomatic treaty.
Exactly. The money technically belongs to the state, but the family holds all the purchasing power.
So they get all the market leverage of a private equity firm, but with the legal invincibility of a country.
Right.
But that still leaves us with a missing piece. What about the people who don't have an ancient religion or a sovereign state to shield them?
The pure private market players.
Yeah.
That brings us to Dr. Waleed's third layer, the invisible hand. The private family offices. These families don't need a religion or a country because they control the market directly.
According to the research, the top 25 richest families in the world control a staggering $2.9 trillion. But I have to push back here.
Okay.
Wait, so the billionaires we hear about on the news, like the tech guys, they aren't the real story. It's the legal vehicles they use.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed separates highly visible, volatile wealth from entrenched institutional wealth. Tech billionaires are highly visible, yes, but their net worth is usually tied up in public stock.
So if the market crashes, they lose half their net worth in a day.
Right. The old entrenched wealth operates through private family offices. They don't want the spotlight and they don't want public stock.
They want tax-exempt trusts and offshore holding companies.
Yes, unlisted assets. The research highlights the Wertheimer family as the perfect case study. They're a Jewish industrial family, the private owners of Chanel.
Right. Elaine and Gerard Wertheimer, they saw their wealth jump from $42 billion to $90 billion recently.
But they manage this through a New York family office called Moose Partners, which quietly manages up to $108 billion.
How do they physically shield that much money from taxation?
It's all about the legal routing. Dr. Waleed highlights their use of a Cayman Islands holding company.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, it received $12.4 billion in dividends in just 3 years.
So just to clarify the mechanics, by routing Chanel's global profits as a dividend to a holding company in the Caymans, they legally bypass the income tax that would have applied in France or the U.S.
Precisely. The money moves through invisible, private channels legally structured to evaporate tax liability.
Dr. Waleed also uses this data to do a reality check on some persistent myths. Because when people talk about hidden wealth, the internet immediately screams about the Rothschilds controlling like $500 trillion.
And he scientifically debunks that. He calls the 500 trillion figure a mathematically impossible, cartoonish myth.
So what's the conservative reality?
He puts one branch of the Rothschilds at around $825 million to $1 billion, and the entire dispersed network of heirs at maybe $400 to $500 billion globally.
It's still massive, but their power comes from owning unlisted private investment banks, not some sci-fi hoard of cash.
Exactly. And this leads to Dr. Waleed's scientific conclusion about wealth. He proves that this monopoly is not tied to any one religion or group.
Right, because if you look at the top 10 richest families, you have 3 Muslim ruling families, 1 Jewish family, the Wertheimers, and 6 Christian or secular families like the Waltons, the Hermes family, the Kochs, and the Mars family.
The true monopoly mechanism is universal across all these groups. It's tax-exempt trusts, sovereign blending, and private family offices hidden from public stock exchanges.
Okay, so Dr. Waleed has essentially mapped the monopoly. We've located roughly $3 trillion in hidden or legally tied up private wealth across these layers.
Right.
Now we get to the 3 trillion project. He wants to eradicate hunger and wipe out slums. But historically, dealing with that much wealth leads to, confiscation or war.
But he has a different mathematical approach. Redistribution without confiscation is the core philosophy of his blueprint.
So he isn't suggesting seizing the principal assets.
No, not at all. He's looking at legally redirecting a fraction of the rent and the dividends.
Okay, so what does this all mean? How do you generate $3 trillion without seizing a single bank account?
He breaks it down into 2 specific funding streams. First, a 2% annual tax strictly on just the top 25 families. That alone generates $58 billion a year. And the second stream. He proposes releasing just 20% of those frozen church and WAF lands we talked about in Layer 1. Not selling the land, just opening it up for commercial long-term leases.
Which generates an estimated $100 billion a year. So over 20 years, that hits the $3 trillion mark.
Exactly. And his distribution plan is incredibly specific. He allocates $1.2 trillion to turn 17 million acres of that unlocked land into cooperative automated farms.
With the explicit goal of ending global hunger.
Right. Then another $1 trillion to build 50 smart WAF cities on empty land in places like Egypt and Iran to end slums.
And finally, $800 billion for a global medical research fund, funded by profits from Chanel, Walmart, and Koch, instead of hiding it in the Caymans.
Yes. But practically speaking, this money has to sit somewhere today. It has to be managed.
Right. Where does this $3 trillion actually physically reside?
This is where his research reveals the infrastructure of modern wealth. The money isn't in a vault. Roughly 80% of it is held in funds managed by BlackRock and Vanguard.
We're talking about the mega asset managers, and their scale just defies logic. By the end of 2025, BlackRock reached a record $14 trillion in assets under management, or AUM.
With $698 billion in net inflows in a single year.
Yeah. And Vanguard hit $11.6 trillion in September 2025, reaching $12 trillion by the end of the year, with 50 million investors.
Dr. Waleed notes that the top 20 asset managers control 47% of all managed money globally. That is a staggering $65.8 trillion.
Wow. It's like finding out that the toll booth operators on the highway don't just collect coins. They actually dictate the rules for the entire global highway system.
Exactly. They don't own the money, but they wield its voting power. And it gets even more complex when you look at how they shield themselves from oversight.
Yeah, the triangle of ownership evaporation.
Yeah.
I need you to explain this slowly, because how does accountability just evaporate?
Well, let's trace it. Vanguard isn't a public company. It is owned by its funds, which means it's technically owned by its everyday investors.
Okay, makes sense.
But Vanguard, as an entity, owns a massive chunk of BlackRock, somewhere between 5.63% and 9.04%.
Right.
Now, who owned BlackRock? Through its own mutual funds and ETFs, BlackRock owns about 6.53% of itself.
Wait, really? So Vanguard owns a huge chunk of BlackRock, but Vanguard is owned by its funds, and BlackRock manages a huge portion of the global markets funds.
Yes, and BlackRock owns a chunk of itself. Legal accountability practically vanishes into thin air. There is no single human owner you can hold accountable.
It's just a closed loop. And Dr. Waleed shows it goes even deeper with something called the Aladdin algorithm.
Ah, yes. Aladdin is BlackRock's proprietary risk management software. We aren't just talking about money anymore. We are talking about algorithmic influence.
Because BlackRock manages $14 trillion directly, but Aladdin oversees an additional $21 trillion.
Which means decisions for $35 trillion pass through a single algorithm in New York.
And who actually owns that $65.8 trillion global pie? It's not all billionaire money, is it?
No, 60% of it, $38 trillion, comes from regular worker pensions. 32% comes from sovereign wealth funds.
That's about $21 trillion.
Right, and only 7%, $5 trillion, comes from private family offices. Dr. Waleed proves that the targeted $3 trillion is hidden right inside this pie.
Yeah, he notes that Egypt's WAC puts 70% of its investments into BlackRock's iShares, and Abu Dhabi is BlackRock's biggest private infrastructure client.
So they all use the exact same pipes.
But if regular pensions make up 60% of it, how do we rewire this without hurting normal people?
Dr. Waleed suggests two surgical strikes. First, a 0.1% infrastructure monopoly tax strictly on managers over $10 trillion.
So just BlackRock and Vanguard, basically.
Right. That yields $25 billion a year from them alone to fund clean water and energy.
And the second strike?
Legally forcing these mega managers, who hold the voting rights for your shares, to vote in favor of humanitarian projects rather than just boosting Apple or Exxon profits.
Wow. So you change the legal instructions given to the asset managers.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, whoever controls these two financial pipes controls the fate of global poverty and prosperity.
This has been an incredible journey through Dr. Khaled Waleed's research. We went from ancient land holdings in the Vatican to Cayman Island accounts, all the way to a server room in New York running the Aladdin algorithm.
It's a completely new way to look at the global economy.
And for you listening, remember, this isn't just an abstract theory about billionaires. If you have a pension or a retirement fund, your money makes up the 60% base of that $65.8 trillion behemoth.
You are part of the very system Dr. Waleed is trying to redirect.
Which leaves me with one final thought. If a single proprietary algorithm in New York is quietly influencing the movement of $35 trillion, essentially dictating the future of global markets and human welfare, who exactly is auditing the ethics of that code?
That is the real question.
And what happens when the algorithm decides that ending human suffering just isn't a profitable enough investment for the quarter? Keep questioning the world around you. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.